everyone. Hello, Saluta.
Hello, Hanan. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. How
Hello.
are you?
Hello, everyone. Please, can you leave in the comments where you're from? And today we have an exciting subject. We apologize because the guest that we had for today, he will not make it for some technical reasons. So we will cover the same subject because it's a subject that is very dear to me and to Saluta, the mind. I struggled my whole life with my mind, and my mind was my worst enemy. Hello, James. Hello, Murad. Thank you for joining us. My mind was my best enemy. Oh my God. Indeed. I mean, my first struggles in my life started from my mind, and this is when I started to study and to try to understand more about the mind and how it functions. And this is also what helped me overcome my inner struggles. Hello, Salah from Montreal. Yeah, thank you for joining. So, yes, so let's talk about the mind and how we can better understand our mind so that we can live better, feel better, and take better decisions in our lives. And all these things can also impact our performance, can impact our creativity every day, can impact our decision making and leadership. So most, I think I would start by just explaining a little bit the difference between the mind and the brain. Maybe you are wondering what's the difference. And the brain is the physical part. It does like the physical aspects of the mind of the brain. And the mind is the non-physical, is the patterns of our thoughts, is the operating system, is how everything functions. The mental part, we would say, is the mental part. uh, would you like to say anything, Steluta, in regards to the brain and the mind?
When you were saying that, the image that came to me, and probably the metaphor that we can use, and I apologize for calling us maybe or associating us or comparing us to computers, but we could think of the brain as the hardware and the
Yeah.
mind as the software that operates the hardware. I mean, it's a very rough and and maybe debatable metaphor, but this is how I would probably easily explain it so that I mean, that was the metaphor that came to me.
Yes, yes. Well, I think whenever I teach this subject, I am not a neuroscientist, but I did a lot of study in this regard. And as a coach, we are, as professional coaches, we need to explain these kind of things, and we need to understand them first, because one of the things that we all need to do is to do it for ourselves first before applying it with others or anything. So, the basic things to know about the brain is first to understand the anatomy of the brain, to understand how the layers of the brain interact with each other. And there are three of them: the rational brain, which is the neocortex, for of the like if you are familiar with these terms, the rational brain. And this is this part of the brain, the frontal part. This part is it holds all the information, and it's responsible of our decision making and everything. It's our short-term memory. And unfortunately, this part, neuroscience proved that it's responsible only for 5% of our decision making. 5% of our decision making, yes. And this part, in order to operate, it needs information, it needs data, it needs statistics, it needs any kind of information so that it can operate. It also plans, observe, make decisions, and so on. So now that you are watching this episode, your brain, this part of the brain is the one that is functioning because you are focusing, you are listening, you are trying to process information, you are trying to analyze, you are trying to understand. So this is the part of the brain that is functioning. The second part is the emotional brain, which is the subconscious mind. And this is the part where the magic happens because it's responsible for 95%, 95% of our decisions. This is the part of the brain that holds all our emotions, memories, our belief system, everything that we learned as kids. I would say, as Saluta talked about the computer, I would say this is the part where it holds the programs. I don't know if you have seen The Matrix, the movie The Matrix, but indeed, we are computers, and this part proves to be the part, the set of programming that we had as kids. And now, even we are adults, so our kids adults somehow, we are the adults that we keep just repeating these programs, and that's why we behave the way we behave, we think the way we think, and we act the way we act. Why? Because our patterns of thoughts, the way we perceive situations, the way we perceive life, the way we think, came from this set of programming, and that's why it impacts everything around us. And what happens is that when we start as adults having errors, having errors, then we need to check the programs and go back to the these programs. And then that's why there is this possibility that has been proved that we can reprogram our minds, and so that we can start thinking differently and acting differently. Okay, I talked about the first part, which is the rational brain, and then the emotional brain as the second part. So the third part is the physical part, is the unconscious part. And this part, it's responsible only for survival and pleasure. And when the person is in a stress mode, it shut downs the first part and the second part. And I love this analogy that, and this is something, by the way, that I explained to my daughter. One day I told her, consider these three parts of the brain as an elevator. And then when the elevator, there is the basement, which is the unconscious part, and there is the first level, and then the second level. And this is exactly like the unconscious, the subconscious, and the conscious part. So what happens when we are stressed, the brain goes to the basement. It goes to the basement, it's shut down, and then this is when you don't have access to the reasoning part. You don't have access to the emotional brain, anything, because you are in a survival mode and you are in the basement. So in order to be able to access the emotional and the rational brain, you need some, like, the breathing part. The breathing can help you get out from the basement. Well, I use the basement just to explain how you can get from this stress mode that we all experience every day. And then you start moving from the unconscious part into the subconscious, and moving into the resonance by the breathing, by repeating some affirmations that makes you again gain more confidence, and then maybe some tapping on the shoulder that it's okay. And this, we can experience it, for instance, when we have, like, let's assume it's an accident, and then you get very stressed, and then when the brain is in a stress mode, you forget about your meeting, you don't access inner reasoning, you think only about survival. In that moment, everything shut down. You don't have access to anything, because the main goal for you is to survive, is to solve that solution. And so in order to get back into the resonant part, it needs time, it needs some breathing, it needs it requires from you to somehow to stop and center yourself in order to start getting back to the original part. It's fascinating, right?
It is fascinating, and it's like I think probably our audience is we all know that it's an educated audience, and I think many of people know about the fight or flight response that hear people talking, or about the freeze part, the freeze response, or about the fawn response. And these are responses that have when we are stressed, as you said, when we are in the basement and we are acting from the mammalian brain, right, which is the oldest part of the brain that we that biology gave us when we started to develop. And these are the reactions that, or the states that we find ourselves in, regardless of the level of stress, regardless of the type of stress. So even if we are in a I don't know, in Sahara, and we're chased by a tiger or by a lion, or we are in the office and we are chased by a deadline, or we are in a fight with our partner, we move straight, the biology changes, and we move straight into this mammalian brain, or into that basement, and we exhibit this type of behaviors, which are fight or flight. So we get into a fight, or we run away, or we freeze. We don't do anything. We let people say things at us, throw things at us. We don't react.
Mhm.
Or we fawn, which psychologists or psychiatrists call this the people pleasing behavior. We do anything to please the other person, um, to save us, to protect us from the hurt that we are getting. So this is a very interesting thing that, as Hanane, you shared, we can elevate ourselves from the baseline, from the basement, with various techniques, and breathing is one of the techniques that is
Mhm.
so helpful. And there are other techniques that we can use as well. And these are things that it is really important to understand about us as human beings, and understand why we react like that. Because when something that we perceive as a threat triggers all this, we are unable to function as these high reasoning
Yes.
uh, beings that we know about ourselves to be. And after that, when we look at certain situations in which we reacted, we don't even recognize ourselves. So why the hell did I say that? It's not me to say that. Or why did I do that? It's not me to do that.
Yes.
Because of that, when something triggers this fight or flight or freeze or fawn response, we are not these smart, intellectual, educated human beings. We're just taken down to the level of basic survival that our brain
And
started at.
the interesting thing is that it's not only about survival, because now the studies in neuroscience show that the brain perceives every day you wake up, the role of your brain is to protect you from any threat. And change is considered as a threat by the brain, by the way, because the purpose is to protect you all the time. And it's proof that this threat can be also social. If you work in an environment that is threatening to your well-being and to your stability and to your your physical or financial stability, you can perceive it as a threat. And again, as Saluta said, everything is about perception. And this is where everything starts. So when your brain perceives a situation as threatening, either physical or social, the brain reacts the same way. It's shut down, and then of course you don't have access to all your creativity. And that's why some people, when they are stressed, they don't operate as normal, and that's why they take decisions that they regret. They act in a way that it's not aligned with who they are, and that's why when they act the way they are in a stress mode, it can lead to a lot of regretful situations and maybe catastrophe. And I wonder if you can share that in the comment. I wonder if it happens to you sometimes that you say something in a stress mode. Assume you receive an email from someone at work. So it's an email that tells you that you are not professional, that you didn't do your work, and then blah blah blah, whatever. And then you get your brain is getting crazy. You know why? Because here you see a threat. Oh, this person, and then blah blah blah. So what happens is that you will overreact, maybe. I don't know. It happened to me in the past, yes. I overreacted, but I didn't know that I can control that situation. And what happens after that? You regret what you sent as a response, as a reaction to that person. So whenever you have this, you know why? Because when you received the email, you started perceiving that as a threat, and then you started maybe telling yourself, "Oh, why this person sent me this kind of things?" And then you start even mind reading and misinterpreting situations. And what happens is that you reacted that way. Perception, thoughts, impacts the way we feel about ourselves, and then we act or react. So whenever you, by the way, whenever you receive this kind of emails, just take a breath, go and have a walk, take a coffee, do something different, and you will see after like 1 hour, when your rational brain is back, and then you have access to all your capacities, you will think differently. And then maybe if you go back to that the same email that you wrote, you will say, no, 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 no way, I will send this email. And this happens every day. It's like calling someone who doesn't respond, and you call him twice and three times and he doesn't respond, and then you start perceiving that as a threat because the person doesn't want to respond to you. Or maybe you're not going to get that job because you don't have the competencies, and then your mind starts catastrophizing. Oh my god, what's going to happen? And then you start feeling bad, and then after that there are different reactions to such threats. Either you react, either you isolate yourself, either you give up, either you withdraw from situations. And then again, the same situation, you can perceive it differently, and you start acting differently by reframing the same situation. If I receive an email and then I don't like it, or for me it's something that is threatening, I still can control my reaction. I may not like it, for sure. I may not like the person how he talked to me on the email or on the phone, but I still can control somehow the situation. Can you, Staluta, share with our audience like a situation where um, you felt like threatened,
Oh, of course.
and then you started maybe, and it's something, it all happens to us, and then you start catastrophizing, or not catastrophizing sometimes is the extreme. You start like mind reading, misinterpreting, and then you start feeling bad, and then maybe you did something, and then you regret that. Can you share something like that?
Yeah,
Well, I have some, but let's go
yeah,
and start with you.
yeah. Sure. Well, Johanna, knowing probably some of the of our audience here knows that already that I've been teaching yoga, meditation, and mindfulness practices for a long time. So I am very much aware many times of my overreactions, so to call them, and when I'm triggered. So the situation that I want to share with you happened about, I think, 3 weeks ago or something like that. I'm part of a board. We were supposed to have an event. Something happened. Somebody made a mistake, and we had to cancel the event just prior to the event starting. And then all these strange emails started flying into my inbox that were really triggering me. That I perceived, looking back after that, I perceived, threatened. It was an attack to various values that I hold close and I hold high. So fortunately for me, I did not react. And I did not reply to the emails when I was like that. So I was able to bring, because we are talking about, this ability that we have of taking a break, disconnecting ourselves, bringing ourselves back into the prefrontal cortex, into our abilities fully. So I did not react that day. I took myself 24 hours to breathe through this situation, to think about my reactions, to understand why would did this triggered me. And the second day, it took me a while to be able to craft an email that stood from my values, that it was a response, not a reaction. So I think by sharing this, the message that I want to emphasize is that, as you said, we have this ability of changing the way we perceive things and changing the way we respond to things that happen to us. So for me, I have many situations in my past, and I had a lot of fights, for example, with my partner, right? When we were both in reaction mode. So we were fighting, forgetting that we love each other, right? We were in this fight like he was my worst enemy and I was his worst enemy. And this is something that happens to many people, regardless of whether we're talking about uh, um, marriage or close partnership, or we're talking
Mhm.
about business partnerships and stuff like that. So these were my things. How about yours, Hanan? Can you share something from your
Uh,
experience?
yes, yes. I experienced many situations like that. I have I have stories also from my clients, and I remember this woman. Really, this story always comes to my mind. A woman who had two kids who were struggling with Down syndrome, and this woman, the fact that her kids having this issue put her in a stress mode on a constant basis, because it's not the fact that the kids having the Down syndrome that made her feel bad, is the what she kept telling herself, because she was having thoughts that people will think of judge her. And then she told me herself that I was feeling ashamed, and like sometimes some culture they refer that to like she did something wrong in her life, and that God is punishing her. And this is the thought she was nurturing in her mind. This is the thought that she kept saying to herself. And then it just went crazy in her mind. And then this is when she started struggling with anxiety and even depression. And guess what? When we talked about this subject, she told me, I feel like even my kids started to be depressed and feeling bad. And that really amazed me, because of course, I mean, kids, they embrace every single emotion we nurture every day. If we are happy parents, our kids are happy. If we are depressed, we will have depressed kids for sure. So this woman started to see her kids really embracing that feeling of anxiety and depression that she was going through. And then after that, I told her, well, look, the only thing that you can do is try to reassess everything you are thinking about, and then accept the fact that your kids, it's not a punishment, but this is what happened to you. So it's a long story short, because we had to discuss that and talk about it and explain that it's a lot of things that is going on in her mind, that what people think about her. So indeed, 6 months after we met, and she told me, I am feeling much, much better. And then because I worked on what I used to send to my mind as messages. And this is when she started feeling better, and her kids also felt better. And I think at some point, this is her story, but every single person here, even me and even you, maybe you are listening, you have stories like that. This is what happens to us, but we keep saying, oh, maybe this, and maybe this is that person meant this kind of things, and maybe that he did that on purpose to me. Like people who are working, looking for a job, sometimes they are rejected, and I experienced that rejection also. But what helped me, sometimes I don't take it personal. I don't take it personal. Now I learned that whatever happens, especially when it comes from people, I don't take it personal. And I consider, and I just move on. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. And two things can help in um, reframing the situation and moving on. You feel bad. There are two options. You feel bad. You try to go back and think and ask yourself, is what I'm telling myself is true? Is it true, or I'm just assuming? This person doesn't like me, is it true, or I'm just assume that he doesn't like me? So the first thing is to be able to go back and check your thoughts, the thoughts that you are sending, the messages that you are sending to your brain, if they are true or not. And because if you keep thinking about them, you will see also that your emotions will start to change. You will start to feeling anxious, and you will start feeling bad, and of course that will impact everything around you, your choices, your decisions, your interactions, your communications. If you have a negative perception about someone, this will be felt in the communication you have with that person. And so the here is trying always to reframe, go back and check if it's an assumption or not. The second thing that you can do in order to change these emotions, in order to start feeling better, is that you change the way you act. Because sometimes it's difficult to go and change our thoughts, because sometimes we have difficulties in really in mastering the thoughts, and sometimes we're not even aware of the thoughts until we start feeling bad, or sometimes we don't feel our thoughts until we react. And you see, in that space, the space between like the trigger, the event, the challenge, and how you react, that space is the most important thing in your growth. Because if you don't uh, enlarge it, is if you don't leave a space between the two, like to breathe, to think, to try to resonate, then it's going to be catastrophe, because there will be just thinking, reacting, and that will be really very bad for your health. So I go back to the second point. The second point is that if you don't manage to assess the thoughts and to mastering them at the level of the thoughts, you can start acting differently. Okay, the best example is that when I don't feel good, I know that there is something going on in my mind. It's difficult sometimes to know from where it comes, but when you don't feel good, for sure there is something going on. So what I do is that I go and do something different. I go to the gym. I will go and listen to music, or maybe turn on a motivational video that can help. I go and read. Sometimes reading, it can be difficult because it requires a lot of concentration, something that you don't have when you don't feel good. For me, the best option when I cannot master my mind, I go to the gym. And what happens? You go to the gym, yeah, I come back exhausted, and I don't have time to think. And anyway, when you go to the gym, you feel better. So whenever you feel challenged, go back, check your mind, assess, ask yourself if it's an assumption or not. If you can change something about it, you will change the way you feel about it. If you can do nothing about that, at least change the way you act. Call a friend, have a cup of coffee, go to the gym, do something different, dance, listen to music, and then you will start feeling better. And of course, the purpose is not perfection. The purpose is just to cope with life, to be better every day. What about you, Staluta?
Wow, this is so true. And you shared so many strategies to be able to manage our minds. And as you said, we have so many thoughts, and one of the best ways to change the way we to shift from reaction to responsive mode is to ask ourselves whether the thoughts are real or not. And there is a Buddhist teaching that says that all our thoughts are real, right? They're there. There's undeniably they're there, but that doesn't mean that they are true, right? So all these thoughts that we have are real. We're not questioning this, we're questioning their validity, right? So, and this is really important when you said when we're trying to change behavior, the fact that we take this response, this period of time to respond instead of reacting affects our mind and affects our brain, because there is this close connection between our mind and our brain,
And
right?
our chemistry.
Our chemistry, exactly. So every thought that we have actually has a pattern in our brain, a physical representation in our brain. So when we have a thought that we keep repeating to ourselves, consciously or unconsciously, we have actually a little pattern in our brain for that thought. And the more we think that thought, the more we fire those neurons that create that pattern in our brain. So, in order for us to change, we need to stop firing those neurons and start triggering new neurons to fire, which means
Mhm.
create new thoughts. So, when we create new thoughts in our brain or new behaviors, we interrupt that pattern and we allow for change to happen. For me, I shared with you, and some of you probably already know that sometimes I have anxiety. And a while back, I had a really powerful anxiety. Of it was full mode. It was probably one of the worst anxiety attacks in my life. And for me, what works is going out in nature, in the forest. That's what works the best for me. Take a walk in the forest, in the old forest here in BC, in Vancouver, and depending on how big the anxiety is, it can take me for 10 minutes to get back into my reasonable brain and get back into my body and realize that there's no real threat. Or it can take me 20 minutes sometimes, because I'm a woman, and we women, we need to acknowledge that we are also emotional. Sometimes it helps me when I cry to change this pattern, and instead of reacting, releasing these emotions and then move on and realize that it was probably something that I can't even uncover for the moment, right? And
Mhm.
just release it. And working out is a big part of my routine as well, and as a way of managing my brain as well. Um, Laughing and having fun. There are also ways of changing, shifting from that reaction to response, giving you some space to be able to detach yourself and to stop the pattern of reaction and start new patterns
Mhm.
of response. And
Yeah.
this is valid when you want to change habits or sorts of habits, um, because it is how the mind works. And I think for the message that I want to leave you most before we leave about this session is that we have this ability to change our minds. Our minds, by changing our minds, we change our brains. And in response to that, our brain changes our mind again. So it is this beautiful cycle that once we get a hold of, that we get this understanding of how we function as human beings, it
Mhm.
is it is not easy, but it makes it more accessible for us to change and to take control of our lives, right? And
Exactly.
there's before we go, and I'm sure you have some things to add for sure, but I just wanted to share with you a Buddha quote that says, what you think, you become. What you feel, you attract. What you imagine, you create.
I love this.
Yes. And this speaks to everything that we were covering here. We have this ability to change the way we think, to use our imagination as long as we are able to disconnect, detach from that response, that reaction mode, and to attract new things by changing our mind, changing our brain, and creating this beautiful positive cycle in our life.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and it's not only about situations; it's also about the story we keep telling ourselves. Like when, and this all this rewiring of the mind. And I like the way you summarized this, Saluta. Is that the more you change your mind, the more you change your brain. Because neuroscience today proved that the brain, you can change the structure of the brain. and you change the structure of the brain by changing the patterns of thoughts at the level of your mind. Like when I lost my right eye, the story that I kept telling myself is that I am not lucky, that I will not have a life like everyone, that blah blah blah, and I kept repeating a lot of negative things. And this is what I kept having in my whole life, like a loss of opportunity sometimes, and then problems, more surgeries, more pain. You see, but at some point you can relate to that, and at some point, not necessarily loss of something, but like some biases that you are having towards a situation or some people, or maybe to your life as a whole, or the story of your life. So once you start changing these words, well, because thoughts becomes words, so once you change the way you think about yourself, that will be translated into positive words, and then you will start feeling better, and then you will start acting better, and then you are contributing in the rewiring of the brain. And of course, I just want to highlight something. I mean, I'm not telling you that everything will be perfect. Once you do that, everything will be perfect in life, your life will be perfect. You just need to accept that life itself is a combination of positive and negative, and it's sometimes challenges and good things, and that's it. If you embrace this, period, move on. You don't have to argue. And your mind will be, once you are faced with a challenge, your mind will be focusing on how can I find a solution instead of why I have this problem, why I have to go through this. And your mind will be changing perspectives because it is no longer in the biases and in judgment and in playing the victim, but you will be focusing on finding solutions. And that will not only rewire your brain, that will change your whole perspective about life and makes you happier. And of course, when I say happy, it doesn't mean that you will have to be 100% happy, but the true happiness to me, from my perspective, is when you are happy even within the mess, even when you are challenged every day, you still can find happiness in the small things. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, James. Thank you, Murad. Thank you, Princess Adola. Thank you, Salah. Thank you, Salahuddin. Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you, Sabra. Thank you, everyone. So, would you like to add anything, Saluta, before we close this episode?
No, just thank you. And um, because I want to say that I'm grateful for having been on this journey with you and on this path with you and having these people in our life. It's another way of changing and rewiring your brain and finding the joy and the pleasure and the happiness in your life is by learning to focus on the positive things and by learning the practice of gratefulness. So I just wanted to say that I'm grateful for being here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you for taking a chunk of time out of your precious life to watch us. Stay tuned and hopefully see you soon.
Bye. Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.